Hey everybody, it's Jeff Miller. Welcome to the Free Yourself podcast, where we invite you to create space to flourish. Day 7. I made it from Lincoln, Nebraska to Chicago, pulled in 3:30. I'm super excited to be here. I do love Chicago, and especially excited for our next guest, Dr. Debra Riley Parr. She's an associate professor at the School of Visual Art, Columbia College, Chicago, and she is a very special guest on this June 19th. She is a distinguished scholar, critic, curator whose groundbreaking work sits at the intersection of fragrance, contemporary culture, and sensory design, with deep expertise in how scent shapes emotions, memory, identity, and social dynamics. Dr. Parr has dedicated her academic and creative life to exploring fragrance as a powerful language of storytelling and human connection. Her interdisciplinary approach draws from cultural theory, sensory studies, and design history to reveal how scent influences our personal and collective narratives. Wow, I'm super stoked to have her. Dr. Parr, she's particularly known for engaging thoughtfully with how fragrance reflects and shapes cultural values, emotional resonance, identity, and personal flourishing, making her work profoundly aligned with the mission of the Free Yourself Scented States Tour. And here we go. Thank you. Excited to introduce Dr. Debra Riley Parr. And we're live. I have Dr. Debra Riley Parr. Debra, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Oh my gosh. I sent Debra some questions in advance, and then we just decided right now that we're gonna wing it a little bit, and we're gonna maybe just throw away the questions. What came up is, on the introduction, today's Juneteenth.
It is.
Yeah. And I was, even on the drive over, I was thinking about that. And culturally, you and your art and your relationship with scent and all of this, I'd love for you to maybe just talk a little bit about what you do, and then maybe how this conversation might, pertain to Juneteenth, or Juneteenth pertain to this conversation.
It's such a great question, and I've been thinking about it all day myself. There's such great scholarship out there on the intersection of race and the olfactory as a method of creating terrible hierarchies in which certain bodies are read in terms of their odors and smells in a way that is very shocking, but also part of our culture and embedded very deeply in it. Mark Smith, for example, did a whole study of the smell of slavery and enslavement, and how certain ideas about the Black body emerged and were reinscribed through this almost what we might call the olfactory unconscious, this idea of the repressed knowledge that we have about the body and the various ways it smells and stinks and creates a kind of identity. And I'll never forget, and he apologized for this almost immediately after he said it, but when Joe Biden was choosing Barack Obama as his running mate, or it was the other way around, right? But he said, he made a comment about how Obama smelled great. And it was just so strange. And he immediately apologized for that. So the idea of liberation, the idea of the end of enslavement, and the, almost, what was it, 2 years that went by between the Emancipation Proclamation and the time that folks in Texas found out that they were actually free and had been free for years. It's astonishing, the kind of racist structures that also bring into play this idea of the olfactory.
Yeah. Wow. I did not know that this was going to be the conversation it's just that we can't ignore that that's
Hmm.
what today is. You said identity,
Mm.
and so much of this, I think, you know, uh, just even beyond fragrance and
Hmm.
everything, but it's so important right now. Identity, belonging, purpose, meaning,
Mm.
mattering. But because of what you just shared, I'd also add no apologies, right? That that it's really a celebration of our scent, our smell, our olfactory.
Hmm.
That not making apologize, not having to feel as though we're apologizing for who we are or what we enjoy on scent
Hmm.
or what you know. It's ours. It's like our fingerprint. We get to own it, and there's really we don't have to apologize or make excuses or
Absolutely.
feel shame about what it is that is emotional for us.
Right. And then at the same time, we also have to recognize that if we do experience discomfort and shame, that that is okay
Mm,
as well, and maybe even to be expected,
mm,
given the kind of socialization that we all go through as children about the various ways the body produces odor.
yeah,
So it's a deeply ingrained set of responses that maybe we aren't even able to articulate, or even we may not even be aware of them, except, as, maybe young girls learn that there has to be a certain kind of hygienic attention to various parts of the body as you're growing up and going through puberty. Um, so this maybe unspoken set of expectations
mhm,
that has been laid down
yeah,
needs to be, as you point out, maybe rethought so that there's more room for celebration.
yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe we can just remind ourselves that we can always be more fundamental whenever we
Hmm.
want to be, right?
Hmm.
That we don't have to go to a niche luxury perfume, that idea.
Right.
We can go to, Grandma and Nana's
Hmm.
pasta sauce, right?
Hmm.
Just this smell of our wet dog,
Hmm.
that there are ways to ground ourselves. It's just like cutting out all the noise, right?
Right.
Same with social media,
Right.
cutting out the noise. We can remind ourselves that scent is not fragrance alone. That's only a small portion,
Right.
right? That scent is from from being a baby to being in sports to hanging with our mates to
Mm.
rolling with our siblings or sleeping in the same bed with our siblings, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah, and this is why I love the work of Kate McLean, who does these scent maps and scent walks.
Yeah.
And she was just here in Chicago, and I wasn't able to meet up with her. And I'm so upset about that. But she led a whole group of people through the city that they live in,
Yes.
trying to get them to do exactly what you're suggesting, kind of acknowledge the scent, the smell of the city,
Yeah.
which is not always completely pleasant
Right.
if you've
Right.
wandered around any city, right?
Yeah. But, I often say though that sometimes those unpleasant
Mm.
scents, they bring story with them,
Right.
right? And they bring narrative with them and personal narrative. And I think, again, when you're talking about shame and identity and belonging, that we're allowed to have those, I don't even want to say warts or things, but we're allowed to have the
The
things that may
imperfections,
thank you,
maybe
because
the
imperfections, if you even think about it from a filmmaking standpoint, the greatest filmmakers really know how to show the
Mm,
imperfections,
right.
you know? And I think that's with scent and fragrance.
Hmm.
The best noses really know how to kind of use
Yeah,
imperfections.
absolutely. And they know how to use the kind of scent that maybe we would prefer to repress. So there's that whole range of the animalic,
Yeah,
the musk, the ambergris, the, civet,
yeah,
all these animalic notes that have their origin in the bodies of animals.
yeah.
And, so we invite those in typically as the base note of some of the most glorious perfumes in the world, uh, because they match really well with florals and create this kind of combination, this uh, a chord of amazing counterpoints.
It's so great. I actually, when you're describing that, I'm thinking something also very primal,
Mm,
right?
right.
And maybe today we're not as primal, although that's debatable sometimes. But so if you think about the animalic,
Mm,
that there's that primal around the campfire, out hunters and gatherers and whatnot,
mhm,
right? I know that my dog acts like the wolf that she is. And she's the gentlest, sweetest, most lovely little dog, but she has little things that are very much the wolf around the campfire,
mhm,
right? And why would we not have that same
mhm.
thing, right? That we have this relationship with that animalic smell. That's something that we worked very hard for it, for our food, for our clothing,
Right.
for, that comfort.
Right. And I always wonder who was the first person to say, you know what, I think this little bit of waxy, stinky material would be really great to scent ladies' gloves.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Thinking about the history of ambergris,
yeah,
because obviously, as you point out, this hunter-gatherer uh, set of habits that we have, like everything was going to be used,
yeah,
not wasted. But, such a strange thing to think about.
yeah. We were talking earlier about 15-year-old boys, um, and there's a little bit of like hunter-gatherer in them
Mm,
that I see, and I find them really magical in their curiosity
mm,
for fragrance.
mhm.
Of course, it's not across the board, but it's pretty endemic, I would say, how passionate they are. But you said you take it even further. It's that
Mhm.
they are really like becoming experts. I mean, they're really learning, and I mean, it's astonishing.
Right. I am all admiration for these young men who uh, have taken it upon themselves to learn all the chemistry,
Yeah,
because it's one thing to love a perfume, but it's another to really understand how it works,
yeah,
what the formula is,
yeah.
and, how the magic happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My neighbor, he and his buddy came to the house the other day, and I do love them coming in and testing the modifications that we have going on.
Mm,
So they really get into a zone
hmm.
about it, and they are really. What's really amazing is the time that they take.
Hmm.
They're in no rush.
Right.
They're they're not. They don't look at their phone. I just thought of that just now. They do not look at their phone while they're doing this. And
Maybe that's a relief too
wow,
from, the compulsion, the visual compulsion,
yeah,
because we are such a visually driven culture at
yeah,
the moment. And so the olfactory might be something of a respite or a way to escape that for a moment.
wow. I'm going to steal that from you because, man, what if it is?
Mm,
Is it?
yeah, why not?
Right? Why not? So then we were talking earlier, and I said, well, please let's not talk too much about this. Let's save it for our discussion. But um, I went to the MAP program, the Master of Applied Positive
Mm,
Psychology at Penn, and Marty Seligman and Dr. James Powelski. I mean, these guys, I think, are some of the greatest thinkers and people, and especially during so much duress,
mm,
right? Of being able to get people and say, you belong, and not all the sugar syrupy
mm,
part of positive psychology. It's not just all, be happy, joy kind of
mm.
thing. And yet, I feel like nobody's discussing smell, scent,
Well,
olfactory.
um, I really can't recommend enough a very recent publication by Jameson Webster. She's a psychoanalyst, called Breath,
Wow.
or is it Breathe? I can't
Okay.
remember
Okay.
exactly the title, but it is a beautiful analysis, if you will, of how breath is something that we share. It's kind of this collective experience, and that seems to maybe tap into what you're trying to think about in this moment of duress that you mentioned.
Well, I mean,
Maybe that's a way that we can acknowledge our common humanity.
my gosh, I love that. I mean, that's so, I mean, it's the core of most, if not all,
Mm,
religions and
mm,
spirituality. It's the core of our existence.
mhm,
Um, and I don't know that we always connect breath with smell or
mm,
scent.
mm,
We compartmentalize them in some odd kind of way. I know that in yoga and different yoga
mm,
teachings, there's a lot of breath through the nose and how the breathing is done, yogic
mhm,
breathing and all of
mhm.
that. So, um, but why why is there? You mentioned a little bit of a history of there not being many. Uh, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of research. Obviously, we talked about Dr. Rachel Hertz at Brown University, and there are people,
Mhm.
distinguished people that study it, but it just doesn't seem to be on the forefront when there's book after book and
Mm.
TED Talk after TED Talk,
Well,
on the others.
certainly, the study of olfaction lags behind the study of the visual. And I often ask my students, how many courses have you, I teach at an art school, I ask them, how many courses have you taken that teach you how to look at something? And almost all of them, have had maybe 10, maybe
Yeah,
20
yeah, yeah,
courses
yeah.
devoted to that. And then I ask, how many of you have had a class that would help you uh, understand what you smell? Mm, none, until they've taken a course with me.
Yeah.
And even I have to kind of sneak it in under the radar, so to speak, and have them, in an art history class, and consider a little bit about, what the historical landscape might have smelled like at the time that we're studying, for example. But yeah, there's lots of reasons why, Freud, for example, really denigrated the sense of smell.
Hmm.
And I'd like to do more research on his thinking about this, but he suffered greatly from um, a nasal condition, eventually cancer of the jaw, and so forth. So, he did theorize that it connected us with the animals, so
Mhm.
that when we stood upright, we kind of left that
Uh,
smelly world behind,
yeah,
so to speak.
yeah.
But there are, Kant, for example, as well, in his, real important work on aesthetic judgment, talks about how uh, the sense of smell is on the hierarchy of smells at the lowest level, with vision at the top, because vision was considered the way to knowledge.
Yeah.
So, if the great thinkers of the time denigrate smell or the olfactory and put it to the side, it can't get any traction, so to speak. But I think that's all changing now, and maybe, your work is going to ride that wave that's beginning, I think, in some ways to shake things up a bit and make the olfactory much more prevalent. But there's still obstacles. For example, I curated a show at the Poetry Foundation here in Chicago a few years ago, and they were really excited about it. And then at the time that when we started putting things together, and they said, but there's not going to be any odor, right? And I said, wait a minute. The show is on the intersection of smell and poetry.
Yeah.
And so we had to work really feverishly to make sure that the scents would be very contained and not expose everybody in the building to random little molecules of
Yeah.
fragrance. But still, it's very difficult to mount a show on olfactory art because there's so many regulations about what can actually be in the space. So there are a lot of challenges.
Wow, there are a lot of challenges. Let me ask you, because I mean, this seems, when you said your students, you asked them, what was the landscape? What did that smell like? What does that have the potential to reveal to us?
Right. Yeah, that's such a great question because there's obviously a lot that we can learn looking at Manet's absinthe drinker.
Yeah, yeah,
However, if you've never smelled absinthe and you've never been to Paris and you've never been to the 19th century,
yeah,
there's maybe some gaps there
yeah,
that the visual can't completely fill in. So, trying to think about those sort of details, I think, adds to the historical appreciation of a particular moment in time that an artist might be trying to help us visually
yeah,
with. But I think of Howardina Pendel's amazing paintings and how at the beginning of her career, she would, spray her canvases with perfume when they were done
wow,
before they went to whatever gallery was going to be exhibiting her work. And I love to think about that, is that sort of Pindel's way of dressing up her paintings for their moment of.
wow. I'm almost speechless. James Pawelski, I asked him he's in Brisbane right now for the International Positive Psychology Convention. But I said I would love to interview at the Barnes Museum in Philly, which is, I think, one of the greatest museums on the planet, right? And now I'm not going to be able to go there without thinking about that. The spray perfumes and um, y- you know, uh,
And the thing about museums, as really wonderful spaces with all sorts of historical troubles as well, but at the same time, the um, necessary environmental conditions that artifacts require
yeah,
uh, don't include fragrance.
Yeah.
In fact, it might include getting rid of any kind of smell.
Yeah.
But at the same time, go to different galleries within a museum, and if you're very attuned, you can tell that each gallery smells somewhat different because artists may have used different kinds of materials.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't making olfactory art
Yeah.
intentionally, but even, turpentine
Yeah.
and paint has its off-gassing.
Which is also remarkable, right?
Mhm.
I mean, for me, and not that you're saying this, but I don't need to go look at art and smell the art, right? I don't need
Right.
to go see a play and smell the play, right?
Mhm.
For me, a great play is the play, and my experience with the play is just, or a
Mhm.
great film or a great novel.
Mhm.
Um, but the more we have the opportunity, for example, with the projects that you've curated, or you know, uh, the walk through Chicago, the
Mm.
walk in the woods, the walk around our own garden or our own neighborhood. Um, the idea of just being intentional, or the
Mhm.
same with even wearing a fragrance, wearing a
Mhm.
luxury fragrance, going into a perfumery, or going out into the garden. I don't necessarily differentiate
Mhm.
that dramatically. I mean, obviously when you're smelling a niche perfume and
Mhm.
something that is really by a great nose, it's like a great novel. It is like a great painting. It is like
Mhm.
a great play, that these layers and things that happen. But I feel as though we have this tool that's available to us, and not everybody can use it, or not everybody can use it on a given day, just like anything.
Mhm.
I say, well, journaling's not for everybody, or journaling's not something maybe that you want to do that day, but that doesn't mean that journaling is not a positive intervention. It is. We know
Right.
that it
Right.
is, right? And it really works well for some people.
Mhm.
And I think the more we explore scent and fragrance and our relationship with it and the stories that might just potentially exist.
Mhm.
Because when you were
Right.
talking about her spraying the paintings and you're talking about the absinthe, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about her body odor
Mhm.
in the painting,
Mhm.
right? And the of the room that you're in, and I lived in Paris for a year and a half. Now, not back at the turn of the century, or the previous turn of the century, um, but there are incredible smells, and by incredible I mean some awful, some rank, some really that
Yeah, every
disturbing.
place has its fingerprint, so to speak,
Yeah,
of its olfaction, and Paris is certainly one of them.
yeah.
Um, you know, I also think, Philadelphia smells like sugar. I don't know why.
Wow,
Get off the plane and I immediately have this sweetness that
wow,
envelops me.
amazing. I'm gonna think about that while I'm there.
And I have no idea why. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know enough about the geography or about what grows there
yeah,
or what they produce there.
yeah, yeah,
But there's something sugary
yeah.
in the air.
Well, let me ask you from a like curiosity
Mm,
standpoint, the value of curiosity, the value of our own human flourishing, our own wellness.
mm,
What does Because that's what you're offering right now, is the notion of curiosity.
right, right. One way that I try to stimulate that in um, any kind of workshop that I might give is to begin by asking people what they remember smelling on their way to the workshop
Well,
or class.
yeah,
Like what struck you?
yeah,
And it's always amazing what people bring to the table there. But then also, I like to, distribute these little packets, these little wax envelopes that I fill with very ordinary materials that have amazing smell, but that once they're isolated, you might experience more intentionally, more intensely as well. Um,
Are they
to
single
wake up.
ingredients or are
Yeah,
they multi?
like a little strip of lemon peel,
Okay.
or some basil out of my garden, or a coffee bean
Yeah.
that I've smashed, or
Yeah.
some pepper, just to kind of wake up the olfactory system,
Yeah.
um, and get the students really intrigued by things that they know and they can identify, but then maybe some things that they thought they knew,
Huh.
but
Yeah.
might actually bring something new to them in a way that wasn't there before.
Where are you taking them?
Right,
Where are you taking them? What is your hope when you greet a bunch of new faces?
right.
Where are you going?
I just want them to be excited
Wow.
about this world that we all share. Maybe that's what Webster's book is all about at the end of the day, that we all share this planet
Yeah.
and it has an atmosphere and we impact the atmosphere in some, pretty dramatic ways. But like what might we get excited about if we just took a moment to experience the things around us and the smell that they generate
Huh.
for us, and not necessarily for us, but we can experience. That's all I'm after. I don't have an end game necessarily. I want to see what happens,
Yeah.
as they try to figure out what it is they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I want them to also maybe feel like, I don't have the vocabulary for this,
Yeah.
which is also a
Yeah.
part of the
Oh, that's so good.
problem with studying the olfactory, is that we don't have the linguistic uh, arsenal that we have for the visual.
And is that okay?
No, it's not okay.
Well,
Maybe it is, but I would like us to maybe consider new words.
Well, that I love. I mean, that I love. I think more that is like um, the notion that sometimes whatever we're experiencing, we don't necessarily have to have words for it.
Well, that is so true. And maybe the language is something that we need in order to do proper analytic work here.
Yeah.
But that maybe you're talking about something beyond that, that maybe we should revel in the fact that it doesn't lend itself so immediately to our analytical impulses. And, this is why I call it our wildest sense.
Yeah.
It's it connects us to the wild,
It's our earliest
and we
and
don't
our wildest.
and we don't have all of the kind of intellectual capacity at this point to
I think
discuss
we're
it.
onto something here. No, because the idea that
And maybe
we're
this is
we're
why
divided.
15-year-old boys are attracted to it, because they recognize that it's wild.
They're pretty good though with describing it.
Yeah.
That's funny. They come up with the vocabulary pretty quickly, at least with their own vocabulary on it. I'm just, as we step out on this tour, and it's not going to just be this tour. It's the Free Yourself tour. It's it's why aren't we talking about scent more? Why aren't we talking about fragrance and smell more? Right? Uh, because I think that for this very reason, if we're in this divided nation, and I'm just being general for the sake of the conversation, but we're divided, whether it's politics, whether it's technology, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
generational, whether we're still divided because of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that maybe sometimes the experience of not being able to put words to it
Mm-hmm.
is like this one, is a connection that we can have that isn't judged.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, I
it's
love
not
that.
labeled, it's not
Yeah.
judged, it's not, this or that, or, it's suddenly, because I mean, Todd and we've been surprised that, like, in Dubai, just as an
Mm-hmm.
example, but it's happened in New York and various other places that sometimes we don't speak the same language, but I mean, somebody coming up in a full burqa who is literally experiencing a fragrance and really kind of communicating with you
Mm-hmm.
about their experience with the fragrance, right? Just in holding the scent card or smelling and what's going on. And they're kind of, it's
Well, you seem to
magical.
be, yeah, to be suggesting that maybe olfactory experience, maybe just even because of the way odors dissipate in the atmosphere, that they cross boundaries.
Oh,
They do not recognize boundaries. This
oh,
is the problem for showing olfactory art in museums, is that it's not going to stay where you want it to
right,
stay. It's
right.
going to waft
Yeah,
into the next gallery,
yeah,
and that's maybe not cool. But, this idea that scent crosses boundaries, does not respect that kind of divide or division.
yeah,
It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you're all smelling this fragrance together, you can't not smell it. Um, that's the difference also between
yeah,
visual. If you don't want to look at something, you close your eyes, you turn away, it's
yeah,
gone. But you can't turn the nose off.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm
it's
really
very
curious.
aggressive in that way too. So,
I
yeah.
really want to come experience one of your installations because I hear the challenges, and
Mhm.
one, we know the challenges, whether it's going into Macy's or
Right.
whatever, walking through there,
Abercrombie and
or
Fitch.
also just
Yeah.
walking into, I walked into a hotel that I stayed at the other day, and it just smelled like cleaning fluid,
Yeah.
and it was just so off-putting, right?
Hmm.
And people, or somebody hugs you, and suddenly you walk away smelling like a bottle of patchouli.
Mm.
And not everybody wants that, right?
Right.
Not everybody wants that experience. And so how do we respect that some people have allergies, some people are
Right.
sensitive to it. We've tried to really take that into consideration with our fragrances and what we do. But I think when you talk about an art installation, how do you really take people on a journey that might be a little uncomfortable?
Right. Yeah, it's a really great question, and I don't have an answer for
Yeah,
that really because I'm trying to put together a show at the moment because, it's really difficult to see or smell
yeah,
some olfactory art, and you really have to experience it. You can't, you know, I always tell my students that the olfactory lags behind the visual by 100 years or more. We don't have a recording device for it.
right.
So I mean, people are working on it.
Yeah,
A lot of people at Harvard and
yeah,
other universities are working on it, but we can't really share smell.
hmm,
If you want to let your husband know what you're having for dinner tonight, and you'd say, this this sauce smells amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, you just have to describe it. You can't kind of capture it and send it to him.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if we describe a sunset to someone
Mm,
and they're not there watching it,
right.
they're basically putting together what their experience of what that means to them,
Right.
right? So I think scent is has that ability as well, right? I'm describing a pasta sauce. Now, maybe if someone's never smelt a pasta sauce,
Mhm.
right? Or if you've grown up in an Italian household, it has different value.
Mm.
But I think that's the magic of it, right?
Mm.
When a great filmmaker makes a film, they're not telling everybody you have to think exactly what I thought.
Mm.
They're basically creating a work of art that allows them to unlock a story within someone.
Yeah, absolutely. A director may direct your eye to certain things in a
Yes.
way. You mentioned plays earlier, in a way that, you know, going to a play is very different from watching a film,
Yeah.
because, you can look around and
Yeah.
see different parts of the performance depending upon where your seat is,
Yeah.
which is very different from, the experience of a film. But, that point is very well taken, that sometimes not having access to something may actually be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What does chocolate smell like? Describing chocolate to someone who's never smelled chocolate
Right.
before, right? And
Mhm.
and what is that? What does that allow their imagination to do? And what does it allow the storyteller's
Mm.
imagination to do?
True.
And what happens in the connection between the storyteller and the person hearing the
Mm.
story, right? Um, I think there's a lot to be said for. Um, I think we underestimate. I know we're developing a TV show, and it's not with the initial idea. I think we've overcome this, but is that they need it to be visual, and I think there are a million ways for
Mm.
a show on fragrance to be visual, right? And not only that, there's a lot of things beyond that that you don't get with a cooking show or,
Mm.
other shows. Um, and I think we just have to um, think outside the box.
Yeah, it's a great challenge.
Yeah.
Sure.
Tell me about your class and how did you end up doing what you do and how did you get a job doing that? Right? When there's so many challenges with
Yeah.
people accepting scent and fragrance and
Right.
smell.
Well, I have to go back to my dad. I mean, uh, my father always smelled amazing. He was, he collected perfumes, and he gave me my first bottle of perfume. So there's a lot of drama there. But at the same time, I just really have always worked at the margins. So whatever that means, and olfactory art is definitely at the margins of the art historical canon, for sure. And you know, I don't teach a course on olfactory art, unfortunately, but I sneak it in
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
because I really do, I'm really committed to the idea that the sensorium is really important,
Yeah.
for students who are studying the visual primarily, to try to situate the visual within the larger experience of the senses, I think is really critical for them as budding artists to
Yeah.
experience, to try to understand. Um, and, it's been really fun. One of my students did a series of little artist book portraits of her friends, and they were all scented differently. And just so amazing, such a sweet project.
Amazing.
Mm.
Amazing. Sensorium.
Mm.
It feels as though it's incomplete
Hmm.
without us having this discussion.
Right, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, and if I were so fortunate as to teach a class, I think I would want it to be on the sensorium. I wouldn't necessarily want to just talk about the olfactory,
Sure.
but just try to think critically about all of the senses and how, that hierarchy that Kant constructed, has done such damage really to the way we think about the body and the atmosphere.
Huh. Huh. First of all, this is just, I love that we just went for it. You said you work at the margins, and I feel as though one of the things that is our dream is to make this discussion, make fragrance, make sense. And for me, it's the creative in all of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Accessible for those who might feel at the margins,
Mm-hmm.
living at the margins. And, I think that it's a lot of people these days that, even who are in the middle of big groups or in the middle of New York City, or, it's like feel isolated and lonely and not of value and don't have purpose or meaning. They don't matter. And, I think that when you said you're working at the margins, I was like, wow.
It's a place where the work must occur.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that, so even when I was in grad school, I was teaching, I don't know, some modern literature class. I immediately brought in the visual because I thought, they really need to see some paintings
Yeah. Yeah.
here, as well as reading James Joyce and
Yeah.
T.S. Eliot and
Yeah.
others.
Yeah. I mean, they all feel so connected to me. I can't separate them. But I'm an actor first. But I mean, when I'm, the work, even when I'm, whether I'm writing, it's like all connected to me. Whether I've got music going, writing, if I'm doing, preparation for work, and for me, like smelling fragrances and just turning up the music and just, going around, walking around. And then, of course, I can only take so many because then I'm like, what did I just smell? And like,
Well, that's
it's too
another
much.
thing that distinguishes the olfactory from the visual.
Yeah.
Is that we can only take so much.
Yeah.
We can look at paintings, we can look
All
at
day long.
Instagram all
Yeah.
day long.
Yeah.
But, we can only really handle 3 fragrances.
No kidding.
There's a limit.
3. I didn't know that.
I don't know if that's
Yeah.
scientific, but
Okay.
I think 3 is generally going to put you over the edge.
Okay, so you're not going to smell all 9 that I have for you
You
here
might
today.
need to take a little bit of a break.
Well, listen, this has been absolutely such a treat. I really hope we'll stay connected. I would love to, if you need any help, if you ever want to, have me stop by and we do something with the class, I would love to do something like that.
That would be so much fun.
Yeah, I would love that.
Thank
This
you
has
so
really
much.
been so enlightening. Thank you so much.
Inviting me to.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Well, what a perfect Juneteenth. Really great discussion on that. And I'm off tomorrow on day 8 of the tour, heading to Columbus, Ohio, and to meet with Dr. Angus Fletcher. And really want to thank Dr. Parr. Really such a treat. And thank you so much for giving us the gift of this amazing discussion.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You got it. Please follow us at Free Yourself and Flourish. We look forward to seeing you guys soon.